Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another 1-2-minute video. Today we are covering the Corrosion shotgun, and whether you are a PvP player or PvE, I have both builds for you today. Now this gun is placed in S tier in my weapon tier list. If you want to see the weapon tier list, it will be in the pinned comments. Now I wouldn't really say it's fully S tier, it's more like S to A-ish tier, but it stays in S tier because if you optimize the gun, it shreds. How do you get this gun? You click Blueprint Shop, Shotgun, and there it is, Corrosion shotgun. Together with the armor blueprint, you will need the gas mask. And you will also need Lone Wolf armor for PvE, 4 parts, and 1 heavy duty for PvE as well. And for PvP, you will need to invest for Savior mask, Savior top, Savior pants, and Savior gloves. And on the boots, you will have heavy duty shoes. Key armor we're going to be using is going to be gas mask, and this is going to be the most important one. For most efficient damage, the gas mask is the best for the Corrosion shotgun. If you decide to use goggles, sometimes you could be doing more damage, but you're going to be gambling your damage, and sometimes you won't be able to crit, sometimes you'll be able to crit, so the damage is not going to be stable. That's why we're going to be using the gas mask for the shotgun. I'm going to quickly go and explain the stats of the gun, not just the stats, but also how the damage is calculated so you can understand. I will also go through the mods and tell you, should you be using these power surge suffixes for your mods? Power surge damage, shock damage, power surge trigger chance, this, all of these. So let's get started. First, how the gun damage works is if you right click on the weapon in the blueprints menu, click details, click X on I keyword, you can read what this gun does. Its power surge damage is based off your PSI intensity, 50% of it, which our is 891 right now. If you basically take this number and divide it by 2, this is going to be your damage of power surge. We can test this. As you can see, I'm not wearing any mods, 891. However, when I test this, the damage will not be that. It will be 615. Where does that come from? Since you know what PSI intensity does, we would have to check the gun's stats. If you take a look, we have a 70% chance to trigger power surge. So we either trigger it or we don't, but it will not inflict power surge status. That is very important. If you go back and read inflict power surge status for 6 seconds, accuracy -40. The shotgun will not be doing this. We will get to that a little bit later. Power surge can deal crit hit, and it has a 15% crit rate for the power surge itself. Not for the bullet, but just for the power surge. So let's just say you shot the bullet, your crit rate would be 10%, while if you shot the bullet again and you triggered power surge, then you would have 25% crit rate on that power surge. When power surge is triggered, power surge crit damage is plus 15% for 6 seconds, and it stacks 10 times, which can stack up to 150 crit damage for power surge. Not for the bullet, but for power surge. Then the last thing is power surge damage factor plus 15%. Now this one is very important. We're gonna hop into my beloved calculator, and here you can see this is the PSI intensity. If we put 15 here, this is gonna be our final damage. If I shot the target, we do 615. So we're still missing something. So if I open my inventory, you can see I have status damage 20%. That will also increase my damage for power surge. And that is obtained from the Cradle perk right here. If I took it off, now we have 0 status damage. And our damage will be 512, which was the exact damage that we put in the calculator. And you can see that this is the formula. We have base damage, which is our PSI intensity divided by 2. Gets us to 445.5. It's multiplied by the 15% that we put in here, and that's basically it. We get the result here. So what you saw here, the power surge damage factor plus 15% is just a new multiplier, and it cannot be increased, it cannot be decreased. It's always there for your gun. That's why we have to keep this 15% here. Now there's many mods for power surge. Obviously you can see there's the surge amplifier, there's the static shock, and there's the shock diffusion. The best one is static shock for the shotgun, which I'm gonna put in right now. What this mod does is power surge status duration minus 50%. And do note how it says status duration. And remember, the shotgun doesn't inflict power surge status, so that doesn't matter at all for the shotgun here. And you gain just a 20% increase of damage. So this mod is best in slot for the shotgun. Our substats are elemental, damage against normal enemies, and that's about it. Now I'm just explaining how damage works on this gun. I'm not going to show you the best mods yet. We will get to that a little bit later. But now, since we equipped the mod, you can see if we go in our inventory, scroll down, there's a new stat called Shock Elemental Damage Bonus, 6.4%. Now when you put elemental, it gives you elemental damage to everything. So Blaze, Frost, Shock, Blast. That's why we have 6.4% here. And obviously the damage against normal enemies is 10%. is called damage bonus against common enemies 10% right here. So this shock is its own multiplier, damage bonus against common enemies its own multiplier, and then if you keep scrolling down, there's another multiplier which is power surge damage bonus 20%. That's all we need to know. So now if I shot, our damage is 719. So we have to put in the 20% here because that's power surge damage bonus. Remember, this is our factor, 15%, which is the passive of the gun. And then we have to put in 10% of damage against normal enemies. And then we have to put in 6.4 of elemental damage. And when we shoot, our surge damage is 719 right there. Although you can see it's 719.55, but it's rounded to 719. I guess it has to be above 5, so 700.6. If it's like that, then it will be rounded to 720. But since it's 5, it just gets rounded to 719. It only rounds the first decimal here. But you can see where this is going. We do not have status damage bonus, so if I went to my Cradle perk and added this, keep in mind, handgun enhancement gives you damage 20%. It's not just weapon damage, it's damage, which means status damage and weapon damage. So if I put it on, now we have a new multiplier, which is the status damage. That means we have to put in another 20% over here, which is status damage, and that is our final damage, 863. Now when I shoot in the game, we will do that exact damage, 863. Let's slowly add stuff, okay? Status enhancement. After hitting a weak spot, status damage plus 25% for 3 seconds. Boom, let's add it. Now when I shoot in the head, we will gain 25% status damage bonus. Which means here we have to put 45. Now, this is our surge damage. 1043. Let's test it. 1043. Then, in the Cradle, we are gonna put first round blast. After reloading, instant damage, power surge, and unstable bomber 25% for 4 seconds. Basically, when I shoot the gun, I will reload and take a look at my inventory. As I reload, power surge damage bonus goes to 45 as soon as I reload the gun. And then it drops back to 20. So that is just this number right here. We have to increase it by... It gets added, obviously. It's not like a new multiplier, so we have to put in 45. So now when I shoot in the head and reload my gun like this, we will do 1260 damage, which matches the number here. But you can see that it's supposed to round to 1261, but it doesn't. I don't know why, I'm not unsure, but the damage is basically very close. Then if we go back to our Cradle, we have, after defeating an enemy, power surge damage plus 25% and shock elemental damage plus 18%. This is only when you kill an enemy, but I mean, and what I mean by kill an enemy, you down them and then you have to fully kill them. Once you do that, you will gain 25% in power surge damage bonus, which will be 70 here instead, and in shock elemental you will gain 18%, which will be this 24.4. And as you can see, if we put that number here, this will be our final damage with after you kill an enemy, after you reload, and after you shoot in the head. Obviously you want to have this Cradle perk for the shotgun, it's a must. The next thing you want to put on is tactical combo, weapon damage, and this will give you just more damage when you reload the gun. Like this, you reload, and you'll do more damage to the dummy in the body. We're doing 387. And the way you calculate that damage is you take your base damage right here, 309, and then whatever your weapon damage bonus is, mine is 20%. I just put that in there. Then we obviously have damage bonus against common enemies, so I have to add a new multiplier, 10%. And now the dummy has a 5% damage reduction for some reason when it comes to bullets. So you have to include the 5%, and now you can see it's 387. And if we shoot the dummy now, we do 387. But you do not have to include the minus 5% for power surge damage. It's only for bullets. One thing you need to know is shock elemental damage is the same as status damage. They both scale your damage. Whatever number is higher, you will get more damage. So it's simple as that. All damage is multiplicative in this game. Like weapon damage bonus, like status damage, elemental, power surge damage bonus. Some of them are additive. For example, let's go to mods. Let's go to mod conversion. Let's go to armor mods and mask. Let's scroll down until we find first electrocution. Click X on the mod here and click on power surge. So this mod right here, you can see that it has a fixed attribute. You will always roll with power surge damage plus 6%. This is a legendary color, so elemental legendary is 8%. So that basically means that power surge is worse. And this substat right here, power surge damage bonus, is additive to your power surge damage bonus. So it's not like it's going to be a new multiplier. So this one is sucky, but I mean, you will get it, so you cannot like get rid of it or anything. You will also get a shock damage, or you have a chance to, which is just 6% elemental damage. Take it as that. It's also not that great because elemental damage is 8%, but obviously if you have this and shock damage, that now is total 12%. Now the best substat is the damage plus 8% on targets with power surge. If you get that, then basically if you put the mod on and put the 8% here, it's basically a new multiplier, and you will deal more power surge damage to the target, and you will deal more damage to the target with your base bullet. However, one problem is that it says on targets with power surge. And remember, the shotgun doesn't inflict power surge, so this power surge suffix is completely useless for the corrosion shotgun. It would be only good for the outer space. Alright, so I'm gonna finish the cradle for you guys, what I use for PvE. Obviously you want this, the deviation master, sprinting if you want movement speed. You will need status enhancement, these two. You will need lone walker for solo missions, and first round blast and transient impact. And then of course, if you use bullseye, you can use steady hand, or you can use bounty hunter, because when you mark enemies and you kill them, you will gain weapon damage 25% and weak spot damage 35%. It will last you 15 seconds. These would be the PvE perks. Obviously you can also have the master tactician, but you will not be able to fit all the cradle perks. So these ones would be the best what we have for PvE. As for PvP, you want to have this, you want to have sprint, you want to have sky operation and advantage barrier. Then you want first round blast, transient impact, steady hand, of course one tactile combo with status enhancement. These are PvP cradle perks right here. And these two ones give you a lot of damage reduction, so they're very important. One underwhelming thing about this gun though is if you are PvPing and opponents that you're going to encounter uses resist advantage, it will be doing very low damage for the first 5 bullets you shoot. To counter that, you would probably have to run secondary a weapon like Wildfire or something that will mark enemies for you, and you'll have to hit 5 bullets to them only. And after that, you can swap to your gun, because basically what resist advantage does is people will be running with 5 stacks, obviously, and once they get 5 stacks, their damage reduction will go up to 50%. So to get rid of that 50%, you have to hit the enemy 5 times. You can see that it's going up now since I equipped the mod. But that's the only issue with the shotgun if you run it. As a secondary, you'll have to have something like an SMG. SMG would be better, obviously, but with Wildfire, you'll be able to mark enemies. And you would probably want to have fire rate on it. And either Hunter's perk, which this will just make the enemy do 20% less damage, or a vulnerability amplifier, which will make you do 8% more damage, in total 16% more damage if you have the mod on the gun. But again, you can either use Wildfire or you can use a Scar to pair with the shotgun, since the Scar is actually compatible with the corrosion and it benefits from the gas mask, and it's also benefiting from the crit rate and crit damage as well. However, power surge cannot crit on the Scar, so Scar will be there just to get rid of that damage reduction from enemies. And then you'll just quickly swap to your shotgun. Now let's get into the juicier part. So in this sheet that I provide, there's going to be PSI intensity. So with all of this armor equipped, this is how much PSI intensity you'll have. Obviously the 1 star, 2, 3, 3 to 5 stars matter. The more stars you have, the more PSI intensity you have. So if you star up your mask, you will get more PSI intensity rather than HP. But if you star up your chest, you'll get less PSI intensity but get more HP. To know what to upgrade, you basically can just go in game and just hover over the mask. You can see it gives you a lot of PSI intensity. If you hover on the helmet, it gives you a little bit HP, but not so much PSI intensity. So if you want to get more HP, you would have to upgrade chest first, second legs, third boots, fourth gloves, fifth helmet, and lastly mask goes last for upgrading for HP. Obviously it's not even worth to upgrade mask for HP. And if you want PSI intensity, you upgrade mask first, you upgrade helmet second, you upgrade gloves third, boots fourth, pants fifth, and chest sixth. Obviously, it's just reversed. Also, the armor that I showed you, don't upgrade these. I just showed it as an example, obviously. But basically, the more PSI intensity you have, which will be here, the more damage you're going to do with power surge. PSI intensity does not affect your bullet damage. So for the gun, you want to use static shock. Static shock is obtained from looting weapon crates right here. You can get it from Shadow Hound. You can get it from only in normal mode. You can get it from Treant in hard mode or pro mode. Red one means hard mode. and the blue one means Pro mode. You can get it also from Forsaken Giant, and you can get it from Leah Lab. Static Shock is best in slot mod for the gun. That's what you want to use. Then we have Fateful Strike. Do note, we are on PvP. Fateful Strike can be obtained from gear crates, normal mode, Silo Alpha, hard mode, and pro mode, and then from Leah Lab. When you use Fateful Strike, you will not be able to deal weak spot damage, but if you still shoot in the head, other buffs that when you shoot in the head will proc, and obviously it will work. Like, for example, the Cradle perk, so you'll be fine. We're using this because it gives you a lot of crit rate and crit damage. And with the shotgun, you're obviously not going to hit 7 pellets in the head in PvP, so... Next up, we're using First Electrocution. This one's very important, don't miss this out. So if you're wondering how the damage comes from this mod, it's obtained from gear crates, normal, hard, and pro Silo X1. Hard mode, by the way, is unlocked in phase 3, and on phase 4 you get pro mode. It's also obtained from Leah Lab. And First Electrocution, what it does is, for enemies without Power Surge status, you will get 30% damage all the time. And it's a new multiplier. What this means is that, remember how we said the shotgun doesn't inflict Power Surge status, which is this? So this is best in slot mod for the mask, for Corrosion. Going back in game, I'm going to show you how it works. Let's put in First Electrocution. I'm going to put this mod, and we're going to have to adjust the values a little bit. So we will gain 8% elemental damage, which is this, 14.4. So obviously, since we had 6.4, it would have to be 14.4 now. We have to add 30% here, because that's a new multiplier for the mass mod. And lastly, we have to change the 10 to 16, because if we check our stats, our damage bonus against common enemies is 16%, and the dummy counts as a normal enemy. So, and now if I need to reload for the 25% damage increase, shoot in the head, and we will do 1,858. Which is this exact damage right here. So that's what this First Electrocution 30% ultimate damage does. It's a new multiplier, it cannot be increased, it's always there, just increases your damage by lots. Next up, we need crit boost gloves for PvP. And you can see on my gloves I have crit damage 15%, weapon damage 4.8%, and weapon damage reduce. What you want to focus for the substats is crit damage, weapon damage, and obviously weapon damage reduce for PvP. Or weapon damage reduce and max HP. You can have both instead of the damage against elite enemies, but that's extremely rare. Weapon damage does benefit, but it's not that important. You could be getting a weapon damage reduce and max HP instead of weapon damage, and that would be totally fine. But in my sheet, you can see that if we keep going down from gloves, we have 15 crit and we have 6 weapon damage, and that's basically it. Obviously, you want to focus gold stats on the damage, crit damage and weapon damage. We will get later to what you should use, violent or talents. Right now, I'm just going to show you all the mods. The reason why we're using crit boost instead of crit amplifier is because in PvP, you want to have as much crit as possible. If you don't crit, you lose out on so much damage, and you're basically going to be wasting time, and the target's going to take longer to kill. So obviously, if we took out and put in a crit amplifier, and crit amplifier gives you 5% less crit, you would be 84.4 crit. Now that might sound like it's nothing, but trust me, it is something. The less crit you have, the less chances to crit, obviously, on the target. So that's why I prefer to use 15. I'd rather have 5% more crit than 15% crit damage, because obviously without crit rate, you won't do that crit damage. And the way you get crit boost is you open gear crates, hard mode, and pro mode Silo Sigma and Leah Lab. Then we have quick comeback top. The way you obtain quick comeback is gear crates, normal, hard, pro, Silo Terra, and Leah Lab. And what it does is, when using a healing shot, movement speed plus 20% for 2 seconds, and refills the magazine from the inventory up to 100%. Now you gain movement speed, but you don't gain damage reduction, which kinda sucks. Obviously you don't have to use this, but this could work for the shotgun, because reloading the shotgun mid-fights are kinda punishing. It takes quite a while. So you can use either resist advantage, or you can use, when using a healing shot, damage reduction 40% for 2 seconds. It's personal preference, or you can use the Enduring Shield, which you can find this mod sheet, by the way, in my pinned comments. You'll understand where to get these mods. You just press Ctrl F and you search whatever you want. But basically, any mod that I mentioned here goes here in the slot. It's best in slot, and for the substats, you want to have either crit damage, like this, 15%, this is maxed out here, and 6% weapon damage. Obviously, it's either crit or talents, as long as it's 4 violent and 3 talents. As long as it's 4 violent and 3 talents, you're good to go. So you can get it either elemental, which would be 8% elemental over here, and 6 status damage. For covered advance, Covered Advance for shoes, and what Covered Advance does is it basically, once you take no damage within 4 seconds, you get 20% weapon and status damage for 30 seconds. And now once you get that buff, you can take as much damage as you want. It will not disappear. Once it disappears, you have to wait 4 seconds again. Once you do, you get the damage buff again, which is very nice. And I highly recommend using this instead of slow and steady. Slow and steady is this one. It gives you 10% status and weapon damage, and it gives you additional 10% when your HP is above 90%. You're never above 90 HP in PvP, so it's completely worthless to use this. Unless you're sniping far away and you never get hit, then yes, this is better than Covered Advance. The way you obtain Covered Advance is Gear Crate, Salo Piachai, Hard, and Pro Mode, and Leah Lab. Next up is Deadshot. This is very crucial for this gun. There's no other option to use other than Deadshot. The way you get Deadshot is Gear Crates, Normal, Hard, and Pro Salo PSI. And what it does is each crit hit grants you 5% crit damage up to 45%, and it will be removed once you reload. It's hard to get these mods, but I'm trying to get better. For PvP, you want to focus either on HP and weapon damage reduce. Either works as long as their stats like mine. Oh, I forgot to mention, on the top piece, you can also put, obviously, 8% elemental, status damage 6%, and weapon damage reduce, HP boost. The way you get this is very rare, by the way. You can get HP boost from gear crates, looting, or opening eggs, which is a gold perk, or Leah Lab. It's very rare, so don't expect to get it. It's going to be almost impossible, maybe like 0.01% to get it. I only got it like 5 in my total game. But yeah, that could work. Obviously, resist advantage I think would be the best if you want to be tanky for the first 5 shots you receive. Since it's bingo meta, everyone just uses it. And honestly, it's getting kind of boring. So you will definitely need resist advantage to counter bingo and Vilfire. Now, let's explain what this means, like all the full list here. So it's basically just if you go down, it's basically what gives you crit rate. So for crit rate, Fateful Strike gives us 10 crit rate. From Gloves mod, crit boost, we get 15% here. And there's nothing else from the mods that gives us crit rate. Then from the armor, Gas Mask gives us 35% crit rate once you trigger Power Surge. And Gun has 8% by default crit rate, and it has a Power Surge crit rate. This is not base bullet crit rate, it's Power Surge crit rate. If I remove this, then this is your base bullet crit rate, and this is your Power Surge crit rate total. I guess I'll just mark it purple so you guys know it's Power Surge basically. For the calibration, there is 6.4% crit, and that's the calibration you want to use. You can either go with 2 crit rates, but you will lose out on crit damage and elemental damage, which is fine because the more crit rate you have, the more damage you'll do, obviously, because you'll just always crit. So you can go with either 2 double crit rates for calibration, and I'll show you right now what I'm using. I'm using Fire Rate, Rapid Shot Style, and I'm using Elemental Damage. Elemental Damage is only for PvP, and you don't want to have 2 elemental damage. You want to have 1 crit rate, which the crit rate goes in first slot, so 6.4%. If you take a look at my gun, the first slot is the 7.3%. For example, take a look at my crit rate here. This one is 6.4%, which means it's maxed. So you want to have crit rate in this slot, and on the second slot, you want to have elemental damage instead of the 8.6%. That's for PvP. That would be the best rolls. Now if we scroll down, you can see that Faithful gives us 15 crit damage. That's 1 substat, Violent. Then we get 30% additionally from the core effect. Then we have Crit Boost, that's another substat, 15% crit damage from Violent Crit Boost Gloves. And we have another Violent Quick Comeback, another 15% crit damage. And then last Violent mod is Deadshot, which gives us 15% substat crit damage, and then 45% from the core effect if stacked fully. In total, we will get 135 from just the mods. And when we combine the gun passive and fully stack it, and the gun passive crit damage 27% is this, we get a total of 312 crit damage fully stacked. Then we have weapon damage bonus. Violent, that means you can get weapon damage bonus on it, so you want to have 6, 6 here, 6 here, 6 here. Then we can get 20 from Covered Advance, and that's just a proc, the core effect of the mod. Obviously, I marked it yellow because it's conditional, and as well this is yellow because it's conditional, it's not always there. Same with weapon damage bonus 25% here, it's conditional, you have to reload the gun to get 25%. And as you notice here, it says Cradle here, so if you keep going down, this is where we're getting the 20% from. The 20% is always there, by the way, and that is the Cradle perk right here, Handgun Enhancement. 25% comes from reloading, which is this Tactical Combo Cradle perk. And then we have 10% from Save Your Set. of weapon damage. If you take a look at Savior, it gives you when HP is above 70%, weapon and status damage 10%. That's why we have it here. So in total, with best in slot mods, you will have 99 weapon damage bonus with no buffs, just Cradle and armor and mods. Then we have status damage, which comes from Talents, Static Shock mod, Talents, First Electrocution, Talents, Covered Advance. And then we also get 20% status damage from Covered Advance, conditional. Then once you hit the weak spot, you will gain 25% status damage. And then the 20% is again the handgun enhancement from the Cradle perk here, 10% from Savior set. Then we have 8% elemental from Static Shock once again, 8% from First Electrocution, and 8% from Covered Advance. This one is a Cradle perk. Once you kill an enemy, you will gain 18% elemental damage, which is Shock in this case. If we deleted that, we will have only 32%. And obviously when you defeat an enemy fully, you will have 50% total. You cannot get more than that. Also, my bad, you actually want to have this calibration on the second slot crit, not first one. So first one will be elemental damage, which is this, elemental damage on first slot, and crit rate on second slot. And obviously if you want to have rapid shot style, there's no better option than rapid shot style. Then if we keep scrolling down, damage to enemy bonus is 0 because we are in a PvP build. Power surge damage bonus is 20 from the Static Shock mod, 25% from Cradle, and 25% from Cradle once again. This comes from reloading the gun, and this comes from killing the enemy. So in total, you'll have 70% here. Power Surge damage factor comes from the passive of the gun. We already covered that. And Power Surge ultimate damage comes from the mask. We already covered that as well. If you missed it, well then, go back and rewind the video, brother. These have their own category. As you can see, I've marked them as 9, 8, 7, 6. These are just new multipliers. If you wanted to ever calculate the damage, you can just take the numbers here, take this number, take that number, and calculate your DPS or whatever you want to do with this chart. Now if we go to the right side here, best in slot mods, strictly for PvP. Power surge damage is one shot, so it's just one shot, not like stacked or anything. And it's no food buffs, only mod stacking, Cradle stacking, and basically it's the damages per shot to a player. It's not to a dummy. We are applying 10% damage reduction, as well as torso damage reduction to the bullet. However, torso damage reduction is not working against Power Surge, which is normal. The 50% damage reduction is also applied from Resist Advantage mod if the enemy is using it. And if you want to know how the damage reduction works, you just click on this video here and just watch it. I explain everything there, how the damage is applied, how damage is calculated, everything you need to know, it's there. For weapon damage reduce, for status damage reduce, everything. So just check it out. Now, here, it's strictly for PvP once again. I just mark it just so you know. And for PvE, I say that it's not recommended to use PvP armor first, which is the Savior armor. It kills stuff slow. So for PvE, you will have to go to this sheet right there, which I'll get soon to. But basically, let me explain this list. The bullet damage here is just weapon damage, your normal damage that you shoot. So if we go in game and shoot the dummy, bullet damage that is white and orange right here. And this is Power Surge. So bullet damage to a player with 50% damage reduction, torso reduction, and 10% hidden damage reduce, and 10% attack, your damage would be over here, listed, with this wall set up here with the mods and armor. One thing I want to explain is that the minus 10% attack comes from your calibration. So that's why we have to include it minus 10%. As well as the torso reduce comes from player's weight, which is here. 65 to 85 kilograms, you will receive a 10% torso damage reduction. That's why you have to include that. And this is from Resist Advantage mod. Once again, is this mod right here, which stacks to 50% damage reduce. And then we have lastly the hidden damage reduce, which comes from, basically I just tested it so many times to the point where I figured out every single player has a hidden damage reduce 10%. So I explained this in my damage reduction multipliers video. Go watch that if you want to find out. This list here, which is 1, has crit damage 117. With Power Surge, it has plus 150 stack, and with Deadshot, 45%. In total, everything stacked, we will have 312 crit damage. And then we have weapon damage, 24% with no Cradle. Obviously, all the mods are included, so we have 6, 6, 6, 6 here. Total, that would be 24, right? Once you stack it up with Cradle, you will have total 99% weapon damage bonus. And this would be your weapon damage with no crit, with just a Cradle 30%, and with 50% damage reduce applied to the player. So your bullet will do 173 no crit. And this will be with the crit. And as you take a look, as the list goes to the right side, it's read from lowest to the highest damage to the right. So This just gives more buffs from the Cradle. We apply more buffs. We stack more buffs. There you go. Reload Cradle. You can see the damage is higher, higher, higher. As you go to the next list, I mark things blue so you can understand what buff we are adding. So this is reload added. This is crit. And this is more crit added. That's why I'm marking the text blue, so it's easier to read for you guys. Then if we scroll down, this is now with no 50% damage reduction. So once you break resist advantage damage reduction, the 5 stacks of someone, this is your damage to the player. 347 with the pellet and 753 with the pellet as a crit, with crit damage 117. You can see what we have here. It's literally all the stats are listed over here and what we are applying. And this is just Cradle perks. And if you go to the very right side, this is with everything stacked. And remember, this is weapon damage, bullet damage, not power surge damage. If we scroll down a little bit, this is power surge damage. So we have power surge damage with 50% damage reduction applied. Now do note, damage reduction counters power surge. However, torso damage reduced doesn't counter power surge damage. Only the hidden damage reduced does. And you cannot see this value anywhere in the game. It's not shown. I just found it out. And there goes our crit damage once again. The status damage comes from the mods 18%, which remember 6 times by 3 is 18% because we have 3 talent mods that give us 6 status damage. If I removed all the Cradle perks here, we would have 18%. With Cradle, we have 93, and elemental damage is 32, and with Cradle, 50%. And you can see right here, after you kill an enemy, you will gain 18% elemental damage. Yeah, all the damage is listed here. As you scroll to the right side, you get to the very end, and you can see that if you buff Whimsical Drink, this is how much damage you will do to a player with a Whimsical Drink, with the 15% damage reduce applied. And crit is going to be this, and crit is going to be fully stacked with the 10 stacks, 150, power surge crit damage is going to be 7,780, and with all the damage reductions applied. And this one is just 10% hidden damage reduced, so no damage reduce applied to the player. Your damage is going to be 1,462. Going to the right side, all the way, your highest damage with Whimsical Drink with these mods will be 15,561 as a crit, fully stacked. And without stacks, it will be 8k, which is, kind of crazy, man. Kind of crazy. Now, this is no dead shot, by the way. This is just crit damage 117 with no dead shot. Now, obviously, take a look at that reload with enemy kill, with weak spot. You gain all of these important buffs, and that's why the damage is so high. But your damage would be around 3.8k without these reload buffs, without these kill buffs, or around like 4.4k, something like that. But you can see this is every single damage calculated with every single perk, so you'll have an understanding of the damage here. That's it for PvP. That's all I have to say for this sheet. And now we go to PvE, and the same thing goes here. You can just read the sheet, and whatever mods you want to put on for PvE, it's listed over here. So Static Shock, Deviation Expert for PvE, because you want to have more fire rates. You don't really need Fateful Strike for PvE, although it could work because you will have more crit rate, and the more crit rate you have, obviously, the more damage you'll do. Personally, if you have a really great Fateful Strike and you have a trash Deviation Expert, go with Fateful Strike. If you have a really god rerolled Deviation Expert, then go with Deviation Expert. It just depends on your substats. I would think that Fateful Strike would be best for PvE because more crit, but then again, you are getting fire rate if you wear Deviation Expert, which makes the gun shoot faster, which increases your DPS. So for PvE, I would just choose Deviation Expert. Then we first Electrocution, same as for PvP. And instead of crit boost, you will have to put crit amplifier, because in PvE, you will be close to mobs and you will need crit damage. The more crit damage you have, the more beneficial it will be. That's why we are choosing crit amplifier for PvE. Again, it's 4 violent and 3 talents. You can see right here. So the mods don't really change that much. You just have to change out crit amplifier and Deviation Expert for the PvE, and that's it. For the armor, obviously you want to have Lone Wolf, 4 parts, which is these. Obviously, if you start them up, you will have more PS intensity, which will give you more damage for Power Surge, but it doesn't give you more damage for base bullet. All the stats are listed over here. If you scroll down, the difference is a little bit higher because Deviation Expert gives you status damage 20, while on the PvP one, you get no status damage here because we're using Fateful Strike for crit damage and stuff. We're using also a blue mod instead of gold, and a gold one would give you less damage because there's no gold mod that gives you status enhancement for the top piece. So the blue one, if you get 12 status damage and 4.8% elemental, and you get 3.6% on a mob bonus, which is the grade ones in this case, it's gonna do more damage than the gold mod. The calculations don't lie. And this one is just considered as talents, so just go with a blue mod. To get blue mods, you would have to basically loot broken delta chests, go from POI to POI, loot gear crates until you get yourself a best in slot mod, which would be status damage, elemental, and grade ones. Now, you would have to get it as blue, green, and then enhance it once. You cannot enhance it 5 times or anything. Yeah, basically I don't have much to say here because I already explained the first sheet, so sheet will be in the pinned comments. And if you scroll to the right, you can see here, power surge damage, 1 shot, no food buffs, only mod stacking. The food buffs are only on the right side, which is the whimsical drink, 44.5%. Obviously with level 5 Chef Azara's, you can get whimsical drink to give you 44.5% status damage instead of 25, so that's why it's important. And obviously you want to have the gold perk, which is the brain freeze perk. And this is the bullet damage to the enemy, 621. And highest is 946 pellet damage. This is with vulnerability amplifier. Now, one thing I did not include, and I'm not going to actually include it, this is to mobs, zombies, not deviations. To deviations, you will do 25% more damage. So in this case, we would just have to do this. Your bullet damage would be 1182 to a deviant if you shooting. And with crit, it would be 3,912 over here if you're shooting a deviant, or if the boss is deviant, or elite enemies. And you can see that this is only for grade ones. So if you shoot grade ones, the bullet damage is for grade ones, not for normal mobs or not for elite mobs. Obviously, you will not have this damage because it's very hard to get 6% on all your mods. Almost actually impossible, unless you're lucky, man. I will just say good luck farming these mods. And now here we have power surge damage for PvE. So your highest damage to a grade 1 will be 22k with no vulnerability amplifier. And that's with fully stacked power surge crit and stuff. Your max damage is going to be 31,344 with vulnerability amplifier applied. Now obviously this is no deviation. Your damage is going to be even higher with deviation. I just didn't include it because it's too many calculations, but you get the point. It gives you a basic understanding. Now the last thing is food buffs, and when it comes to food buffs, you will need to use a whimsical drink with a bellflower basically. Obviously you want to have brain freeze, mimetic, Chef Azara's level 5 to get the 44.5% status damage. For wars, if you use this, and if you don't use the damage boost as a drink, which is here, then you can use obviously iced tea for movement. But then you'll have movement, but you won't have damage with the shotgun really. So this would be good, I guess, only if you want to roll very close to other people and just shoot them in the face. But yeah, the whimsical drink is only if you want more damage for your elemental damage, and that's obviously by far range because your power surge damage doesn't decay far range. Now as for the food buff, you obviously use a sandwich, which will give you 33.6% damage reduce if you have a level 5 Chef Azara's. That's pretty much it. Kitchen set right now is bugged. It doesn't give you 30% buff, so that's all you're getting from Chef Azara's. And if you don't use this, then you can use a lunched meat. Obviously, it will give you more HP. And then there's the pristine buffs, but I don't have any of that right now. So these are all the buffs that you can use for PvP. Now, as when it comes for PvE, you can use the mixed fried hot dog. Mixed fried hot dog will do more damage enemies that are marked. And it will do 20% of all of your damage, not just bullet damage or, it's basically going to do power surge and bullet damage 20% more. Max stats you can get for this food buff is 27.6 with Chef Azara's level 5. Then there's the Stargazy Pie, which you could use. It will always have that crit damage boost when you kill enemies, so this would be a good option as well. You can also use the Bone and Deviated Sausage. It will give you 15% damage against bosses, which is literally the same thing as the hot dog, except it's 5% less and it's always there, but it's only against bosses, while this one is only towards marked enemies. Would be great for elite enemies, would be great for bossing, but the best one would probably be Stargazy Pie or the Bone and Deviated Sausage, as you won't be always marking enemies with this gun. And if you're doing PvE, then I recommend using either a crossbow or just use Wildfire for fast marking. If you want slow marking, then just mark with bingo. You just swap to the gun, shoot 3 times and swap back to the shotgun, and you'll have a 45% increase to the weak spot, and the target will be marked as well. But yeah, that's it for the food buffs really. There's nothing else you can really use. You can also use pan-fried fish to increase your fire rate right there, to increase your crit damage, weak spot damage, PSI intensity, there you go. But this will be a separate video when I finish my food list as well. And that's all I have for you guys for the corrosion build. But yeah, ladies and gents, that's pretty much it for this video. If you have any suggestions or if I did something wrong in this video, leave a comment down below. Let me know. If you guys have any questions, join my Discord. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and peace out.